Welcome. Welcome to John Reviews. We still don't have a segment. Jason, we still don't have a segment name for this. John Reviews Art and Portfolios. Today, let me lower that down a little bit. Fuck. Today, we have Pocket, Silver Clash. We'll think of a name eventually. We have Pocket Stash that posted on the Art Reviews Discord. And she says, furry shit. People Pog, and then People Hands. Older commission. I've been trying to improve, but we'll take any advice on it for future pieces. Let me pause the music. It's paused now. Okay, so you're not gonna do any improvement on this image. So every comment I'll say on this, I'll try to do it so that you can implement it for the next image, because that's what you requested, right? So let's begin. Welcome to John Cena. If I had a cent. Anyways, so Pocket. First of all, I actually think this is good. As objectively, also this is the first furry art I'm reviewing ever, so it's interesting given the angle of it and all. I believe that your overall skills, let's start with the positive. Your overall skills are actually pretty even. I don't find this, I don't find many artists, especially the younger, you know, I don't know how long you've been painting, but looking at your image, I'd say you're still on the younger side of being an artist. There's one thing that stands out that it's really bad, or it's significantly worse than everything else compared, but you are pretty much evened out as far as quality goes, which is a good thing. It's a really, really good thing. I'd say your main weakness is definitely your background, but I'll get to that a little later on. Okay, so I see what you're doing here with the with the composition. All right, coming up in the next 5 minutes. Have you considered that maybe you're colorblind? Shut up. All right, so given the composition here and the camera angle, I see what you're doing. There is one thing that I have learned. I have done lewd art before. And I've done it in a couple of ways, where one is more like ass in the face, and others are a bit more like, let's call it shy of an angle, right? And I'd say that it's a lot more successful when it's less ass in the face. So what I'm saying is that, for example, there's two things that objectively you could have done better on the composition. You could tilt her hip more to the right, where the ass is pointing less at us and more to the right, and that in return will show us more of the torso of the character. Because right now, your character hips, and the legs and the hips are a bit disconnected from the torso. If I were to remove this leg here is actually a big problem, because it's creating a quote-unquote hidden tangent with the torso. Where the torso would be, this whole leg is just following the flow of what would be the torso, and it would be way better if we would move this leg even like towards us, which would mean more to the right or towards the center of the image, and you'd have a lot more space to show like it's mainly the top part of the torso could be shown just a little bit more. Another issue that I find is that even as an anatomy, I know it's like what's the word for this? Anamorph, anthropomorph, and you know what I'm trying to say. Yes, she would have a very long torso. She would need to have a very long torso given the angle that you got going on here. Anthro, yeah. Again, as far as composition goes, that's what I would do. You can make the ass cheeks a bit like with the shift in the gesture. It would still be like maybe considered in a way a lewd, or a part of it is a bit lewd image, while still showing readability throughout the whole character with no compromise, right? Because right now your image is literally just an ass and legs, and while I understand that's the main focal point or the idea behind it, I still believe there should be storytelling even in lewd images. I'd say that is my number one sort of criticism for lewd imagery, is just that simply having a naked or a really extreme angle is not enough. If you give it a bit more storytelling, I like what you're doing here with the storytelling, as far as like she's maybe like, it looks like she would be kicking someone while using her spear or whatever. Maybe less kicking, more spell making, because I can see that you're using the spell. Like there's this sort of like energy trail from her staff, which sort of implies that maybe the staff was somewhere here and then it got dragged, like she dragged it like that across. So maybe less kicking, more spelling, more spell like. But it really is like, right, due to the nature of how blunt currently your composition is, it's literally just Calyx is saying that I'm rude by saying it's just an ass and legs, but I'm saying it as it is. Of course you have other issues. I will touch on them briefly. One of them is a bit of a proportion / perspective. Everyone has those. It's pretty common. It's pretty normal. For example, like the leg and feet here. First of all, the leg length. Generally, the anatomy seems to be a little off. Again, I don't know how much you try to go for, like 50% human, 50%. Panda, red panda. I think this is a red panda, given the tail and everything. What was I talking about? Oh yeah, so proportion and perspective. So the leg, the especially the lower leg, I think it's my main issue. Lower leg and foot compared to the other one seem to be at different sizes, and the reason for that, it's a proportion issue, but the main fundamental problem that causes that is perspective. And I can tell that is a bit of a perspective issue due to the background. It feels like you've done the character first, which honestly is okay, but you didn't make any perspective lines, or at least it looks like. I don't know if you did or not, but it looks like you may not have used any perspective guidelines for the background to match the character's angle. It feels a bit eyeballed, you know? And eyeballing things is fine as long as you understand the fundamentals of it, like once you've done a lot of like perspective drawings and you studied and stuff like that, I'd say it's usually safe to eyeball things. But like for the longest time, I wasn't eyeballing anything on my work. I would literally do perspective and vanishing lines for everything that I would apply on my images for like years. Only somewhat recently, like 3.5 years ago, is when I started being more comfortable eyeballing things, because I've just done it so much. I'm just giving you a bit of perspective on things. Get it? Perspective? Because I'm talking about... Sorry. I'm just trying to give you an idea of, like, don't be afraid to use guidelines. Use them all the time. The same goes for construction of the body. Again, the first thing I mentioned is the leg. Is the leg covering the torso. You could have saved this issue if you had drawn the... like you blocked it out underneath before, even though it's going to be... Even though something is hidden in an image, you should still, at least in the sketch phase, you should still draw like as if it was an X-ray kind of picture. You should still draw, in this case, like the torso behind the leg, just to make sure that everything sort of like lines up. And the last thing that I'll touch on is your colors. You're going a little too saturated overall. So for example, you have really saturated purples here. You have really saturated greens, really saturated pink, again, also / purple. Over here on the spells, you gotta, like, to the point where this looks like it's pure white, especially on the lighter parts of the image. And the same goes for, like, on the face. It looks like it would be pure white. You want to avoid pure white and pure black, which is going to be my next comment. You want to avoid them as much as possible, and not because you shouldn't do it and it doesn't exist, pure white and pure black. Technically it doesn't. It's very difficult to get pure white and pure black in real life. But you want to avoid it because when not done correctly, and and have a specific use for it, it will flatten out your image no matter who you are. You could be a newbie, you could be a professional that fucking, I don't know, won an award for color. Is there awards for colors anyway? Anyways, it doesn't matter who you are. If you don't know how to use it correctly, and it's subject... Sorry. There's a random red pixel here that I just cannot stop looking at. Do you see it? It's getting me distracted. Delete this. There's this random red pixel here at the bottom. It makes no... Anyways. I would suggest matting your images a lot more. It looks very digital. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but there is a lot wrong with it. When you go a little too digital, which is like you go really bright and then really dark, and for example, the leg is reading like it would be metal, even though it probably is latex or very, I don't know, like a material that is highly reflective, even though that would be the material for this character. You still don't want to do it as if it was... You don't want to render it as if it was metal. I know it wasn't your intention, but it's reading a little bit like that because of the extreme, really bright and then really dark. You can have a big contrast. For example, I'd say latex or even like really tight jeans usually have that kind of like... I know what you're trying to do here, right? There's that kind of reflection where it tends to be very sharp between a brighter area and a darker area. I get that. It's just that the values that you're using it and the colors are making it read like it would be metal. So in this case, I would probably make your shadows brighter and you can still have a sharp contrast between the two, but it's reading a bit like metal, and there's several areas in your image as far as values go that are overblown or just overburned. So like the shadows are like pure black, the lights are pure white, or at least it looks like, and that tends to flatten out your image and anyone's image, really. I would say that an overall critique for this is like, keep going, do more construction work. A summary of it would be do more construction drawings, as in like you if you're gonna draw like the torso and the torso is hiding some other body part, you should still draw the body part that would be behind like a torso, for example. Your values, try to be a lot more matte. I think you've done the tail here, looks really nice. It's probably my favorite part as far as render goes. Also, one thing I want to touch up is, because everything is sort of saturated, your focal point as far as color goes is everywhere. For example, this tail is really saturated. It's giving a lot of focus to it's pulling my eye into it quite a lot. And then you have like the leg, and then you have like the spell, and your focal point, you should have two focal points here. The ass, because let's be honest, I see what you're trying to do, and the torso. No matter what angle, unless you can completely see the head, no matter what angle you have your characters, torso will always be a focal point. Always. As humans, we're just wired to look at features. Whether they're human, whether they're animal, it does not matter. It's just what it is. It'll always be a point of interest, no matter what. So you want to use color. The same comment I made about like, oh, you go too bright and too dark, and it's reading like metal. And so you should matte your values. That same comment can be applied for color. You go too saturated and then too desaturated. You kind of want to balance it out, and then do just a little splash of more or less saturation, because all it matters is contrast. So if everything else around was saturated but the focal points would be desaturated, then the desaturated part would be a focal point because of the contrast. It's not that saturation equals focal point, as in the more saturation there is, the more focal point there is. No, that's not the case. It's all about contrast, right? So, for example, you could have, now you know what? I made my point across, so there's no point in me reiterating what I just said. Overall, I think you definitely have the skills. And the good thing is that your skills seem to be evened out, which tend to be kind of uncommon for a lot of people. So that's a good thing. It's sort of like you're leveling up everything sort of like evenly. You know, usually there's always something that stands out, that it's either terrible or amazing. Remove this red dot. This red dot here. Just it's triggering me. That concludes the portfolio review for this image. Don't forget, tier 1 subs get art and portfolio reviews. Tier 2 subs get paint overs, all done on stream, all recorded, all uploaded on the video section here on Twitch. Just, you can click on the playlists for the reviews. Even if you're not a sub, you can probably learn something, a thing or two maybe, from these reviews. I'll see you on the next one.